Jacob's Painting here with a new tutorial, and today we're doing something super fun. I've got this model for Venom from Marvel Crisis Protocol. First time I picked up one of these minis, and I gotta say I'm pleasantly surprised. The plastic on these models is really nice. The details are a little bit more shallow than what we're used to working with, like from Games Workshop and stuff like that, but it's a different style. It's okay. These plastics are great. Almost no cleanup needed, and only a little bit of putty work to fill in some gaps that weren't even that bad to begin with. And then I've got his base here. It comes with a great textured base. Put a little sand on there for the urban rubble texture. And here's what he looks like on the box. And this is definitely Venom. He's gone through a few iterations, and this is the one we're using, but it's a little boring. You know, I'm kind of an old school guy when it comes to Spider-Man and Venom, and I really like this look for Venom. This is the McFarlane days. I don't think Venom has ever looked cooler than this image right here. It's got those blues and the crosshatch shading very accentuated, and I'm going to try to copy that. But first, we got to prime this guy. So I've got our Stynylrez black primer. Any black primer will do. We're just going to do a very light primer on this guy, making sure not to blast it on there and get it too wet, because like I said, the details in this guy are pretty shallow. Don't want those to disappear because we are going to be putting a lot of paint on this guy. So take your time, make sure that you're not spraying too much primer during the first go, and you'll be fine. After this, we're going to get into doing our blue workup for Venom. I'm going to go ahead and post all of the paints that I used in the description below, because it is a fairly limited palette, but we're going to do a lot with it. First one of those paints is Blue Black from Pro-Acryl, one of their newer paints. And I'm going to thin this down to a transparent level with some flow improver in the airbrush, and very lightly go over the entire model, making sure to leave some of that black primer showing through in the deepest recesses. We're going for that high McFarlane contrast comic book style, so I'm going to be maintaining a high spray angle on all of these blue colors for the entire process. Once that's done, we're going to go to dark blue, still a very dark blue color, a little bit brighter than Blue Black. And again, I'm going to do some flow improver in there, get it kind of semi-transparent, and we're going to maintain that high spray angle going over most of the model, doing just a little bit less than we did with the Blue Black, so that we're starting to build up that gradient from pure black up to our nice blue color for Venom. And for that color, I'm using Pants Blue. Really nice kind of primary royal blue color. I think it's the perfect color for our source material image, our reference image. And this is where I'm going to start focusing on details of the model. So I'm picking out big muscle groups, picking out the biggest details where the light would hit him from a very high contrast top-down angle, also called a zenithal highlight, because it's as if the sun was at the highest point in the sky, or the zenith. And this is where the airbrushing is going to get really important, because we don't want to blast out these details. So make sure to have gentle trigger control. Turn down your air a little bit because we're working closer, and just take your time and have fun. Like, that's the point of this model. We're doing sort of a one-off thing because I really like some of the comic book characters from the Crisis Protocol game, especially these big dudes like Venom and Hulk and stuff like that. So we're just having fun, having a fun time. We're not going for speed here. After that, I'm going to grab some bold titanium white, and I'm going to drop a few drops of that into our Pants Blue, just to get it a little bit brighter. You can see what it looks like here. I think it was 2 or 3 drops, so, you know, season to your taste. And again, even tighter, I'm going to focus on some of those big details, like the biggest muscle groups and the points where the light reflection is going to be brightest. So you can see here, it's the top of the head, top of the shoulders, his big lats, all that good stuff. Again, take your time, be careful, get that zen state of having a good time painting. We're not worrying about getting a whole army of guys on the table like we usually are. So yeah, just have fun with it and be careful, take your time, caress that trigger, don't want to overdo it. Next, we're going to work on the iconic Venom tongue. Got it primed black here, but that's okay because we're going to start off with some burnt red. And we're going to do a light base coat. I want most of that black to disappear under this burnt red, so it might take a couple of coats. So we're trying to work with really thin paint still. So yeah, just give it a nice solid base coat of that burnt red, and then we're going to get into a more pinkish color like our reference image. And for that, we're going to pull out Magenta, nice even pink color, and I'm going to lightly spray that over so that some of our burnt red is still poking through just a little bit, you know, kind of at the connection point of the tongue, the base of the tongue. I'm not sure what the term for that is, the connection point where it's, you know, in his mouth. Want some of that burnt red still peeking through. And then I'm going to show you what I mean by a few drops of bold titanium white. So 1, 2, 3, bam. And then I'm going to stir that up and mix it. And this is going to be our pink highlight color. And I'm just going to kind of focus the rises and curves of this wily tongue here to get it a little bit brighter pink. I want to go for that over-the-top comic book style. So we're not going for a realistic tongue color. We're going for that hyper pink, hyper bubblegum pink comic book Venom tongue here. After that, we're going to work on our base. Got some grays here for that. We're going to start off with dark warm gray, lightly base coat the entire thing. Again, with this initial color, we're going to leave some of that black primer showing through for the deepest details and biggest shadows. Just using some neutral grays because I'm assuming that this base is supposed to be from like New York City. Everything in Marvel happens in New York City. There are no locations other than New York City. And then I'm going to do some light neutral gray, highlight those panels of the sidewalk and some of this urban rubble, probably because he's duking it out with Spider-Man, cracking the city up. And I'm also doing all of our airbrush stuff first. Like I'm going from step to step to step, doing all of our airbrush stuff first, and then I'm going to get into brush painting so that way our time is efficient. I can set the airbrush down now, and we're going to start blocking in the other details. Got that same light neutral gray that we used on the airbrushing for the base, and that's going to be our base coat for the white symbols and his eyes and his teeth and stuff like that. I'm going to skip doing the teeth in this step specifically because I want to do the reds and pinks of the inside of his mouth before I paint his teeth. So that way I don't have these nice pristinely painted teeth and then get pink paint on them from trying to paint his mouth and like paint around him. It's just easier to paint the whole mouth red and then go back and paint the teeth. But first things first, right now I'm focusing on the kind of Venom spider on his chest and back and his crazy parasite eyes that he's got on his mask, his head. Not really sure. I guess it's his head because he's like covering the whole guy with his parasiteness. But yeah, just take your time. These details are not as bold or as crisp as, say, like a Games Workshop Space Marine. So you're gonna have to really have light brush pressure. Take your time. Make sure to balance the arms on the desk there. Maybe the side of your hand to get a really good base, and just take your time. And then we're going to work on the mouth. I'm starting off with the same colors we use on the tongue, so burnt red first. Just going to base coat everything in there with a nice solid burnt red, super easy. But again, take your time. There's not a huge like bevel or lip of detail between the end of the mouth and the start of his head. There's a little bit there, but it's really easy for your brush to kind of skip out of that detail if you're trying to use it as a guide. So again, light brush pressure. Want to make sure to balance your arms on the table so you're not using those muscles to hold up your arms and the model at the same time. That can cause your hands to shake. Got both of my hands and my forearms pressed on my desk when I was painting this stuff, so I have a lot of control. And also make sure that you're hydrated. Like, you'd be surprised at how much your hand shaking can improve, and it'll stop if you're really well hydrated while you paint. So yeah, just drink a lot of water. After that, we're going to come in with the magenta. This red paint is still a little wet, so I'm doing some kind of half-assed wet blending just to tie those colors together. Again, making sure not to skip out of that detail, not going to smear pink paint on the nice blues that we airbrush. Take your time. I wanted a little bit of a brighter pink for some of those mouth spots, so all I did is I grabbed some of that gray that I had on the palette, that light, almost white gray, and then just mixed it into our pink. Super easy, you know. Again, seasoned to your taste. Whatever type of pink or mixture you want to do, you can use white or whatever. And then we're going to come back and do the teeth. And I don't have very much paint in my brush here because I don't want the thin paint that we're using to like flow off of the teeth into the recesses around those other details where we just painted. So I have very little paint in my brush, and I'm kind of using the sides and edges of it to sort of edge highlight these teeth because, again, the detail is not very bold, and I don't want to press too hard or slop too much paint on there. I just want to catch all of these tiny little pin teeth that he's got, and that's why I'm using the side of the brush, just kind of skip over the edge there and rub that light neutral gray paint on there as a base coat for our teeth. With all of our base colors blocked in, I'm going to give them a nice glossy varnish. Got this Lucky Varnish from Ammo by Mig. Longtime viewers of the channel will know how much I love this stuff. It's awesome. It's ready to go into the airbrush, no thinning required. Flows great. It's awesome. Using a gloss varnish, you want to make sure you don't build it up too much. So as soon as a part of that model starts looking shiny or a little wet, move to a different part of the model. Don't keep spraying it. And I'm going to hit both the model and his base, including his tongue there, get it nice and glossy so that our wash will flow over it nice and smooth. It won't want to stain on any of the flat surfaces, and it's just going to settle into those details. Next, we're going to get out our wash. I'm using the Mr. Hobby weathering wash system. This is a kind of a hybrid oil wash and enamel wash. It behaves like an oil wash, but it dries like an enamel wash. It's really easy to blend out and clean up. I've done videos about this a number of times on my channel. I really, really like this stuff. It's a little hard to get though. It is a Japanese import, so if you don't have a shop that you can order from that does import stuff, you might have to order direct from Amazon, which can take a few weeks, but it's well worth the wait. Or if you just don't want to wait, there are a lot of companies like AK Interactive, Ammo by Mig, a bunch of other ones that do enamel wash paints that are very, very similar, super easy to use. They don't really stain. You use a solvent or a thinner to clean them up and blend them out, and they dry exceptionally fast. You're not sitting around for a couple of hours waiting for your wash to dry. And you can see that after I've initially put the wash on the model, I've dried my brush out, got a little bit of solvent in there, part of the two-part system of Mr. Hobby Weathering Colors. And I'm wicking away a bunch of the excess, and I am cleaning up anywhere that multi-black color filter has sort of dried on the big flats of his muscles where our blues are, because we do want to go for that hyper contrast that McFarlane is known for, you know, like pure black to straight, bright, vibrant color. And this is where I'm taking a little bit of creative liberties with doing this. I'm using the sort of high contrast miniature style that I like to paint stuff in, which is going to be a little bit of a hybrid for the Crosshatch comic book shading that we're going to do after this step. So in my way of doing it, I get hyper contrast with our colors paints, and the Crosshatch is not as bold. That's just how it's going to look. The other way you could do this is just take Pants Blue, which is our brightest blue, solid base coat the entire model, do the exact same steps up to this wash, put a wash on it, and then do the crosshatch shading that I'm going to show you. And that way your crosshatch is going to be way more bold on top of that bright flat color, so it'll look a little bit more like he just stepped off the page. Whereas this is sort of a stylized comic book where it's a little bit more real but has those echoes of the cross shading and all that kind of stuff. And then once our wash is dry, I'm going to pull out an Ultra Matte from Ammo by Mig. This is that same Lucky Varnish. Love this stuff. Do a light varnish over the whole model. It's going to uniform the finish. It's going to take away that shine, and it's going to make it to where we can paint on the model again, whereas the gloss varnish makes paint really hard to stick to the model. It wants to kind of flow around and bead up. We don't want that. We want to do some painting on here. We got a lot of delicate, intricate painting to do. All right, now that that's dry, you can see how we have that nice ultra matte finish. And this is where I'm going to start doing our cross-hatching, and I've got some pure black paint. This is coal black from Pro-Acryl. You can use whatever black paint you're most comfortable with. Very tiny, sharp brush, and I'm going to come in and start drawing in the bold black ink lines that comic books are known for. That cross-hatch shading with the little hashes and streaks and bold lines and stuff like that. So basically what I'm doing here is using the wash that's already settled onto the model as a guide for where these bold lines need to go. And then for style, I am drawing in those little hash marks. And this is where I would say it becomes optional. So you guys can see what he looks like without the crosshatch shading. We still have that ultra comic book contrast. The model looks great. You could totally skip this step and then go in and highlight up our white areas and his mouth and teeth and stuff, and he'd be done. Like, they'd be fine. But I really want to go for that comic book style and have that cross-hatching in there, those bold, pure black lines that really get the point across. And as this paint dries, it is going to mute out a little bit. So that's why I say this is kind of a hybrid style, because the way that I've done the airbrushing and the wash shading, those black lines are not going to be as bold, but they're still visible when you see the model in person and when you see it here on camera. It's just, you're not going to be able to see it from like 4 or 5 feet away, but if you get close to the model and look at it and really study it, you're going to be able to see that. It's kind of a cool factor type of thing, but it's totally optional. You don't have to do this, and the model is still going to look really good. It's just, I wanted to show how I did this. I left in all of the footage, just only sped it up a little bit because I'm really taking my time with this. And when you thin your paint for this, we don't want to thin our paint as if we're doing like a thin base layer or a glaze. Like, we don't want it that thin. We want it just thin enough to where we can have a nice wet brush with some flex and the paint is going to flow. So what I suggest doing is adding a little bit of water to your paint at a time, and then trying to draw little lines and stuff on your palette or maybe a piece of paper or scrap plastic or something like that, just to see how it's going to flow. Because we want to be able to leave nice clean lines but not have the paint bleed or flow onto the model too liquidy, right? We want a lot of surface tension with this liquid paint. So that's why I'm not thinning it out as much as I normally would, but I'm also not doing it straight out of the pot because it would dry too fast and be too thick. So you're going to have to find that happy medium that you can only really find by practicing in person and trying it out yourself. Okay, so now you can see I've done basically the entire model. You can see those bold comic book lines. And now I'm going to focus on the face, and I'm going to draw really thin lines around the edges of his eyes, making sure to stay inside of the sculpted detail of his eyes. Again, it's really shallow on these Crisis Protocol minis, so take your time. Try not to use that bevel detail as a guide so much, because it's really easy for your brush to kind of skip out of it and your hand to slip. Again, I'm bracing my arms on the desk. I'm bracing the palm of my left hand on the desk, so that way I'm not utilizing those muscles to hold my arms up in the air, and that's going to help keep hand shaking down. That's one of the best things I can tell people to do, is like when you're at your desk, get your forearms on the table, get the palm of whichever hand is holding the model on the table or desk, and that way you're only utilizing the muscles in your fingers to do the painting and like hold up the model, and it'll really help take the stress off of your arms. You might see that's weird because like you're used to holding up your arms and hands all day, and this model basically doesn't weigh anything, but you would be surprised at how much that can help your hands stop shaking, or, you know, the small little shakes that everybody has and has to figure out how to manage. It'll really help with that. So definitely try that out when you're doing this at home. Done a little bit of that same black lining on our base here, just not as much. I want it to kind of not be the focus of the model, so I'm just pretending that the focus on the camera is focused on Venom and not his base. And after that, I'm going to do a little bit of dry brushing. So I've got that same light neutral gray. I'm going to lightly dry brush over the base. It's going to pop out those edges and details and also give us that slightly powdery, dusty look of crushed up concrete to make it look like a real urban rubble battle scene. Once that's done, I'm going to pull out our bold titanium white, again kind of thinning this out enough to where it'll stay solid or opaque, but not enough to flow off of the tiny details that we're painting it on. And I'm just going to go in and highlight up the areas that we blocked in with our light neutral gray. So the Venom spider on his chest and back, his eyes, and his teeth. And we're just going to pop those to pure white. Normally, I would say I don't ever use pure white. Don't go that bright unless it's like a final tiny edge highlight detail. But on this guy, we are going for that hyper contrast, ultra bright colors, vibrancy, comic book style. So we're going from that light neutral gray to pure white to really pop those details off of our blue Venom body. If you're having trouble drawing these lines on top of this detail, you can switch over to kind of doing it like a easy edge highlight where you use the side of your brush. You're just going to have to be extra careful that you basically only have enough paint in your brush to scrape onto those raised details because they're really shallow. This is not as sharp of an edge as, say, like a Space Marine shoulder pad or something like that, right? So barely any paint in your brush, very gently, light brush pressure, scrape the side of that brush over those raised details, and you can get some nice sharp highlights on there, but just make sure to be careful. And here he is. He's all done. I've glued him together, hit him with a final matte varnish. And yeah, I think it came out great. It looks very similar to our reference image, which you can see right here. And it's a little bit of a hybrid. So you can see in our reference image, it's like flat colors with maybe a teeny little bit of highlight from that light source, but those lines are extra bold, whereas mine, the airbrushing is extra bold and our lines are a little bit more subdued. But that's what I was going for. I knew I wasn't going to do flat colors, and it worked out great. Hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I have another Crisis Protocol model that I'm thinking about doing, so if you want to see more Crisis Protocol, yeah, tell me in the comments. Like, let me know if you want to see more of that, and maybe I'll do more. And I'll catch you next time.